Welcome back to another episode of Fantasy Football RPG. I'm Mike. That's David. Today we are talking about Kaleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa. He is 6 foot 225. That's unofficial, but Iowa's lifting program. I believe he's 225, even if he doesn't look it. And he is currently 21. He's going to turn 22 right before the season kicks off in August. David, I know a lot of people are fired up about Kaleb Johnson. I know people want them on his team. They want to have him on their fantasy teams. What are some key statistics people should know about Kaleb?
Okay, so you mentioned one of them. He's 21, turning 22. That's pretty young for running backs, which is something you always want to have, both from a football standpoint and a dynasty standpoint. Just one from dynasty, you get him more, like he has more left in his tank. And from a real life football standpoint, if he's doing this as like an early 20s teenager, then imagine what he's going to do when he keeps growing up. He keeps getting bigger. And the other thing I want to talk on is missed tackles forced per touch. If you've listened to our other episodes, you know I like this stat. Here's where Johnson ranks. 0.257 missed tackles forced per touch. Very good. Ashton Genty, 0.4. Nobody's touching him. Nobody ever will touch him. He's fantastic. But he's better than Henderson. He's better than Hampton. He's better than Judkins, which is like the tier 2 guys are running backs. He is the best at forcing missed tackles.
Yep. I just found a little thread from Ryan Heath back in the day. Missed tackles forced per touch is one of the best indicators for future fantasy success and real life NFL success. We keep hitting it with all these guys because the top 5 are so good at it. Do you have a baseline for some old prospects, or are we just going to say that?
Oh, yeah. So that's a good thing to bring up here. So if we're looking historically, I've got Bijan, Saquon, and Breece Hall. Actually, that's a lie. I don't have Saquon. Pro Football Focus wasn't tracking missed tackles forced per touch back then, but Bijan was 0.4, and Bijan was a top 10 pick.
Yep.
Kaleb Johnson is good. He is not that good. But Breece Hall, early second round pick, a lot of people had him going in the first at the time. He was 0.3. That's, same neighborhood. And another thing, Breece Hall, he had 2.83 yards after contact per attempt. Now, we know at the NFL level, he became one of the best running backs. As a prospect, he was good. He wasn't fantastic. Johnson's yards after contact per attempt, 4.42. That is substantially better. So basically I'm not saying Kaleb Johnson is going to be better than Breece Hall. Breece Hall was the high end of the possible outcomes. But when you're looking at it just from a prospect standpoint, very strong case to be made. Kaleb Johnson is a better runner than Breece Hall was.
Yep. On tape, Kaleb Johnson, we're talking about the prototypical Iowa running back. This is a bruiser with a mean streak. He runs in a straight line very, very well. And I just imagine the poor safety trying to do like study for his physics test. He's probably not taking physics, but then Kaleb Johnson's meeting him the whole. It's a future car salesman right there. Just no more interest in football. Better hands than people give him credit for. They're not good, but they're better. And I think that people underrate his straight line speed. He does have the explosiveness to truly hit the top gear. It takes him a little longer to go from that 4th to that 6th gear, but from 1st to 4th, the explosiveness is there. It's tough to gauge the vision and the footwork because Iowa's offensive line was so dominant. Some of these holes were just wide open. So maybe he has good vision, maybe he doesn't, but I'm willing to believe that he does, given the program that he's come from and the production that we have seen. So talking about some team fits for Kaleb Johnson, we talked about 3 before the show that we're going to talk about. So Las Vegas Raiders. Go Raiders. Hey, I'm from Boston. Go Raiders. The Raiders at the top of the 2nd round, Chicago with one of their 2nd round picks, or Minnesota in the 2nd, or maybe they trade up into the 3rd, or maybe they get crazy and they just start throwing 1st round picks at running backs like it's 2001 again. Let's anchor down on the Raiders. So if he goes there at the top of the 2nd, what does that do for his dynasty price, and how does that impact the Raiders as a football team?
So let's start with the Raiders on-field product. We know that they hired Pete Carroll after the Antonio Pierce thing didn't work out, which is a good thing because Carroll has a track record. We saw a very long, very successful stint in Seattle where all he did was run the football. And he's inheriting a situation that is somewhat similar to what he started off with in Seattle. Obviously, that defense isn't there, but he has no quarterback situation, which in 2012, he didn't have a quarterback situation. They brought in Matt Flynn. They took a third-round flyer on Russell Wilson. Wilson obviously ended up being a franchise quarterback, but throughout the early days especially, and even as Wilson's career went on, he turned into a top 5 quarterback. Pete Carroll did not stop running the ball. Yep. This is because he believes games are won and lost in the run game. He's an old school guy that believes running the ball sets up play action, lets you do whatever you want. Some analytics folks disagree with that assessment, but it doesn't really matter because that's what Carroll believes. That's how he'll operate his offense. Yep. There's no running back there right now, nobody worth mentioning anyway. Sorry, Dylan Lobe. I'm a UNH alum, but he can't play. But yeah, so if you get Johnson in that offense, just like someone who can absolutely run the ball right through everyone's throat, that Pete Carroll's going to turn him into his Marshawn Lynch. From an NFL standpoint, it's going to be fun to watch. From a dynasty standpoint, I mean, I'm not sure how efficient he's going to be just because there is no passing attack defenses need to worry about, but he's going to have volume, and you always chase volume and hope that efficiency follows.
Yep. He's one of those guys that he could turn a couple of plays into big plays, but he's not going to be the kind of guy that's catching 7-8 passes a game. So you really just got to hope he falls in the end zone a couple of times. For Chicago, listen, they just hired Ben Johnson. He already has beef with DeAndre Swift. It's well known. Maybe he keeps DeAndre Swift in the DeAndre Swift role, but he could also take Kaleb Johnson and put him in that David Montgomery role. This would be a very reliable RB2 for fantasy. High volume. Hopefully the offense takes a step forward. It should with a former number 1 overall pick. The cap just went up a tremendous amount, so they're going to throw ungodly amounts of money at offensive linemen. So I think Chicago is the kind of offense that I would love to see Kaleb Johnson in. And then Minnesota, no shade at Aaron Jones, the ghost of Aaron Jones that is still around. He's an unrestricted free agent. He could retire. He could walk. He could go back to Minnesota. But Kaleb Johnson would be a very good supplement there. I know Thorku over on Twitter is in love with Kaleb Johnson, and I trust Thor for all of his draft analysis. Go check him out. If he goes to Minnesota, I'm going to be very in because Kevin O'Connell has a way of unlocking offensive pieces to their highest potential, and Kaleb Johnson is just a ball of clay that we are waiting to be molded, which would be fun. So, Dynasty. Oh,
Mike. I think I lost you for a sec. What was that?
Oh, that's heartbreaking. Hopefully the listeners didn't lose me, but let's talk about the Dynasty.
I heard Dynasty and then it froze. So,
well, that happens. But Dynasty Bryce, he's going in the 110 range in Superflex, according to Football Guys ADP. How do you feel about that?
110 is highway robbery. I understand to a certain point you need to draft quarterbacks because they're so important in Superflex. If Ward or Sanders get top 5 draft capital, I'll probably feel obliged to draft them early because I'll just get war flashbacks to Justin Herbert and how everyone was laughing at the Chargers for taking him that early. And you're a fool if you take him at the 108. And turns out he's great. I acknowledge NFL scouts are better at this than I am by and large. So if both guys get top 5, top 10 draft capital, I'll probably bite the bullet and take them before Johnson. But if they fall to the middle first or out of it entirely, which honestly I could kind of see happening, I'm getting real Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis vibes from this class, then I'm taking Johnson. In terms of pure talent, he's probably his inability to catch passes, he's probably my RB4 in this class. But I'm still the running backs are so good, I'm still willing to make him. I'd probably go as early as 106 with him.
Yeah. I guess the real question here is what would you be willing to pay for a 22-year-old David Montgomery? Because that's what we're projecting him to be. That's kind of a good pro comp for him. This is just a thick boy who's going to break a bunch of tackles, can handle volume. We're just hoping for touchdowns. So I will be taking him at the 110 everywhere.
Yeah, and that David Montgomery comp there, just remember, he was the consensus 102 when he came out. Josh Jacobs was the only guy ahead of him.
Yep. But that does it for our Kaleb Johnson preview. Bottom line, draft him early, draft him often, or scoop up the value as he falls. and enjoy him if he goes to your NFL team. If you made it this far, be sure to like and subscribe. Check out the full series where we're breaking down all the prospects that you need to know about. And I hope you have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Football RPG Podcast. If you made it this far, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to check out written content, head over to lastwordonsports.com.
Don't let the goblins get you.